record. All right, I'm recording tonight. We have Johanna Rader discussing Neptune and Chiron and the Galactic Center. Take it away, Johanna.
Thanks so much. It's actually Johanna, but it's
right,
okay. Everybody, the J throws everybody. I was just born in the wrong country. I think if I was in Germany, where this name comes from, I'd be totally fine. But I'm an astrologer from Albuquerque. I am kind of obsessed with the Galactic Center and Neptune. I was born with Neptune on the Galactic Center, so this is kind of what spurred my research and interest in the topic. Yeah, I'm in Albuquerque, so we're like Santa Fe's ugly stepsister. All the cool people live in Santa Fe, but Albuquerque is a great place, so if anyone's in the area, love for you guys to come visit. I run a group called the Albuquerque Astrology Friends group, and we also had a meetup site for a little while. It's inactive right now, but we are going to be activating that soon. So yeah, go ahead.
One quick thing. You will explain what the Galactic Center is because somebody asked in the.
Yes, I was actually going to say, I'm assuming everybody's, astrological level is, we understand that there's, the modern, at least to the extent to the modern planets, and then a few asteroids. I mean, I think most people know what Chiron is at this point. But yes, the Galactic Center is kind of like the newest, along with Chiron, discovery that we are talking about. So yeah, I have going to go into the Galactic Center, going to go into Chiron, all of that. So
take it away. Sorry, just making sure.
No worries. I'm going to share my screen, and full disclosure, I'm running on about 2 hours of sleep. My toddler just figured out how to crawl out of the crib last night. So if I'm a little loopy, that's why. I'm also taking copious amounts of Zyrtec because we are having the annual mating ritual between the junipers here in New Mexico. So I'm going to see what I can do here. This may be a very Neptunian presentation. Okay, can you guys see my screen? Yes? I can't actually see anyone except myself. So.
Looks good to me. I don't know if anybody else has any comment, but.
All right. So originally, I had one title for this, and now I have three. So it's Neptune, Chiron, and the Galactic Center. Generational influences in music, film, and culture. That's really the meat of this presentation. And then the more specific we're going to get when I go to the actual time period where Neptune was on the Galactic Center, we're going to look at the intersection of escapism, exile, and other worlds, because Chiron becomes involved as well. So we all are pretty familiar with generations in astrology. When we think about generations, it's usually associated with your Pluto sign. And, it's kind of the traditional significator of a generation. And when we think about what Pluto is associated, we think about struggles, the big life-changing events that helps us transform into this identity that our entire generation is associated with. So there is a slight difference usually between the Pluto generations and what the sociological designation is between, the baby boomers or the Generation X. We have millennials. So there's usually some type of overlap between the Pluto generations so the baby boomers, I think sociologically are considered from 1946 to 1964. That's what I found in Wikipedia, but in astrology, they're kind of mid-Pluto and Leo to the beginning of Virgo. So there is a little bit of a shift and a different differentiation between sociological definition and an astrological definition. But for the most part, we look at Pluto as the identifier of what generation you are a part of. The thing about Pluto, though, it has that elliptical orbit. So some of those generations are longer. For instance, that Pluto in Cancer, I think, was about 30 years or so, or 25 years, and then it got a little bit smaller, 28 years. I think Pluto in Virgo was 28 years or 18 years, and then by the time it got to Pluto in Scorpio, that's only 11 years. So there's kind of this interesting inequality, I guess, between the Pluto generations because they are so varied. It kind of has created this micro-generation, sub-generation designation within the Pluto generation. So I like looking at Neptune on top of the Pluto generations because Neptune has a very circular orbit. It's 14 years in every single transit as it goes through all the signs. You know, Venus has a very similar shape of an orbit. It's almost perfect, as they call it. But when we actually look at the Neptune transits, which are 14 years, layered with the Pluto transits, we can look and see what, you know, major life events are happening for the generations, and what type of movies you were watching, what type of film you were interested in, and music you were listening to. What were you really feeling and absorbing as part of your culture? That is almost as important in identifying what type of generation you are as what the major political movements and major things that were like actual physical things that were happening in your world that Pluto signifies. So I love looking at the Neptune transit because it adds a whole new layer of how your generation shows up. And then why do I look at Chiron as well? So what does Chiron have to do with this? I mean, if we look at Chiron, those transits are extremely erratic. Chiron's only in some signs for, you know, 1.5 years to about 8.5 years. So the orbit is extremely elliptical, and it goes in between orbits of the other planets, in between Uranus and Saturn. So I like to think about, you know, these little tiny transits that were happening within a Neptune transit or within a Pluto transit, and thinking about what type of wounds your generation carries. And it could have been, you know, many little things were happening within that generation that were sort of marking you, or sort of, you know, having this little impact on you personally, as well as the rest of your generation. And we'll get into exactly how Chiron ties into Neptune as we go on. So I know this is not a really scientific graph, but I wanted to show you how the Pluto generations and the Neptune generations sort of overlap, and how they align with each other. So as we can see, you know, Pluto and Leo was a very long generation. It got a little bit shorter as Pluto and Virgo came in from 1957 to 72. Then Pluto and Libra, you know, was a pretty short generation in Pluto terms. Pluto and Scorpio was even shorter, but you can kind of see how all the Neptunes are the same length. Since the length of Pluto and Leo was so long, there were two Neptune generations happening within it. Pluto and Virgo also had Neptune and Scorpio, and then the beginning of Neptune and Sagittarius happening. But then you look over here and you see Pluto and Libra and Pluto and Scorpio. Those two generations were completely encapsulated within one entire Neptune transit. So I think there's some signification between these two generations here, and this little intersection between Pluto and Libra and Pluto and Scorpio, and Neptune and Sag, and Neptune and Capricorn. As you can see, they both end pretty close to each other, versus the other generations, which overlap a little bit more. But we'll go on to that a little bit more down the line. So for Neptune, how is Neptune a generational influence? Well, Neptune creates the trends. Neptune creates what we are attracted to, what we are being drawn towards. There is sort of this hypnotic aspect of Neptune. If you have read Liz Green's book on Neptune, there's a whole chapter on hypnotism and Neptune being signified. But when we think about a trend, and we think about what creates something that's popular, what does that really mean? I mean, we don't know. There's this very nebulous sort of collective hallucination, or a collective fantasy that we're all agreeing upon, that we all want, that we're all drawn towards. And who gets to decide that? Like, who decides what's cool, what's popular? It's the teenagers, right? And Neptune's transit is 14 years long. So if you know anything about marketing, or if you know anything about consumerism, people are targeting the 14 to 21 or the 28-year-old. So it's like this two Neptune cycles that are happening, that are kind of in control about what happens, what is popular, and what trends are being set. So as we know, Neptune is signified by music, film, fashion, glamour, which is also, incorporates celebrity, fantasy. It's also illusion, escapism, mysticism, spirituality. Dance is also associated, which we'll talk about a little bit. Trends. So what is popular? What cool words are being thrown around? What's the atmosphere of that time period. Photography, obviously drugs and narcotics are also associated with Neptune. Now I know Neptune gets a lot of flack about its negative side and depression and drug abuse and all these things. We're going to try to focus on the more positive side, which is music, film, how the arts are expressed through Neptune. So yeah, we talked about the popular collective fantasy hallucination. I mean, I like to think about Neptune as an aura, like this mysterious thing that's making us all want to pay attention to one specific person or one specific movie or one specific actor. What about that is so magnetizing that makes us want to? That's the influence of Neptune. So consumer behaviors, desires. I mean, Neptune is a huge, huge connection to desire and what we're really longing for. So that can show up as, you know, what we're consuming, what we want to fill our lives with in our very earthly experience. So for film, went to film school. The suspension of disbelief is what we're talking about in this. Neptune depends, the experience of watching a movie depends on our ability to forget that we're sitting in front of a screen with a bunch of other people and pretending that it's real. So we are suspending our disbelief of what that thing is in front of us, what that story is being told. And that is all about how Neptune is helping us get to that point. If people don't believe it, then that film is going to be not popular. It's not going to be, you know, absorbed into the collective hallucination or the agreed upon fantasy. It'll be rejected. And of course, our devotional idolatry. And this is how celebrity shows up, because we don't idolize the same gods and goddesses and saints and priests and religious figures the way we used to. We idolize celebrities now. So who do we worship and what do we worship? So now we're going to jump right into the generations and sort of go through each one and talk about what were the trends, what were the fashion, what were the films. And if you have seen, you know, Neptune presentations, you probably are familiar with a lot of this. So I'm not going to go too much into it. And I do have a lot of text on each slide, so I'm not going to go into every single one. But if you'd like the slides at the end, I can definitely email you and send them to you. So Neptune and Virgo, 1929 through 1942. The fashion was functional. This was the time between World War I, World War II. This was the Great Depression. This was the Dust Bowl. So things were scarce. People were in poverty. And this sort of scarcity and in service of Virgo that showed up in this was very much in the fashion. Everything was work related. Everything was service oriented. Rosie the Riveter is considered to be one of the most famous iconic images of World War II, of women coming into the workplace or place and sort of moving in men's roles to serve their country. So the trends were like independence, the human will to survive, no frills, essential only. If you know Virgos, they're not Leos. They don't do that. They want to make sure that things are essential, and they want to make sure things work correctly, and they can strive to actually make that fit into a productive way. So the films that were coming out, the very first film ever considered to be the first talkie or the first sound film was The Jazz Singer in 1929. The Wizard of Oz is considered to be one of the greatest films ever made. Citizen Kane, also on the top 100 list of all films ever created. These were all happening during Neptune and Virgo, which is a very much a precise type of atmosphere of making sure things are effective and traditional. So the music was coming into a lot of big band music, jazz, swing. Louis Armstrong was really extremely popular. Glenn Miller Band, those were the types of trends that were coming in, the music that was popular during this time. Once again, you know, very functional type of music. This wasn't like fantasy related, really wasn't out there. It was like stuff you could go with your friends, with your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and dance to physically in a group, listening to real music with real instruments. One thing I found out that was interesting is Billboard magazine published its first hit parade in 1936. So what was that? It basically was the very first list of popular music, like the top 10 or the top 100. And of course, it later became the famous Hot 100 list that Billboard has. Billboard's been around since the 1800s, and this was kind of the introduction to starting to categorize things. Virgos are very good at categorizing things. They're very good at keeping track of data. So that was interesting that that was showing up during the Neptune and Virgo generation. So we move on to the Neptune in Libra, which was 1942 to 1957. This was post-World War II. And we moved into this ideal life, the family, the people moving back to the suburbs, people having, the 2.5 children, women at home, men in the workplace. It was this reversion back to a traditional conservative kind of, feminine and masculine roles. I mean, Libra is a Venus ruled sign. So it was looking to create romance, create beauty, create, the prettiness. Liz Green says in her book, it's that post-war fairy tale that everyone was trying to get to. The mass hallucination that everybody was agreeing upon was this idyllic life that everyone was trying to create. The films were Casablanca, the King and I, Funny Face. These are very traditional musicals that were put on screen. It's a Wonderful Life is a good example of a man who is longing, wishing to have that ideal life that he feels inadequate. He wants to be, he wishes things were, totally different in this beautiful, idyllic world that he wants. So you can see the Neptune in Libra, the fantasy of this perfect world coming through and how that was showing up in the films. For music, it was blues, rock and roll, country, Chuck Berry, who's considered the founder of rock and roll, Everly Brothers, crooners. So it was this like beautiful harmonic type of music, Sinatra singing about love, Billie Holiday singing about the blues. So that sort of longingness, that beauty in the sound and people's voices, that was very popular during this time. Trends were happening. Film noir was a huge trend that was happening during this time, which kind of featured the femme fatale. So another archetype of femininity that was coming in. So Libra, Venus ruled once again. The suburban home was very much featured as well. So yeah, that atmosphere of romance was very much present during this time. So what happens next? Neptune and Scorpio comes in, right? So you can sort of see this trend of back and forth, previous generation rejecting the next generation rejecting the previous generation. But this is typical of any type of generational experience. What's interesting is the people who were being born in these Neptune generations weren't setting these trends because they were too young. They were growing up with these trends. But then the next one after the one that you were born in, you were responsible for setting those trends. So all the people born in Neptune and the Libra generation now were coming of age in the Neptune and Scorpio generation. And this was from 1957 to 1970. And what happened? They rejected everything. They rejected everything from the idyllic, perfect 2.5 children, go to work and get married and have a traditional conservative life. And they dove right into that Scorpio, which is life's tough, life is hard, life is real. We don't want the BS. I don't know if I can cuss, but the fashion was mini skirts, right? The shortest skirt possible. So that sex appeal was really coming out with Neptune and Scorpio. Bell bottoms, love beads. I mean, this is the typical hippie generation. My parents were born during this generation. So we got the go-go boots. Surf fashion was really popular. And then this ideal of long hair, right? Men weren't supposed to have long hair. So as you can see in the picture, we got some long-haired people going on. This is actually a picture from Woodstock, the famous concert that happened in 1969. So films that were coming out, West Side Story, considered to be one of the greatest musicals about race in our country, about societal discord. It's also an interpretation of Romeo and Juliet. There's a concept of comedy and drama. It wasn't just this pristine, everything's beautiful on the outside sort of Libra aspect. There was this undercurrent of darkness behind the comedy. So it also created these epics, these real life based movies. So Ben-Hur, Cleopatra, it wasn't some crazy fantasy. It was stuff that was really based in reality. Scorpio wants things to be real. Also, we have the rise of the horror movies. We have Hitchcock movies coming into being really popular. Psycho, obviously, was made during this time period. James Bond is very, very popular during the Neptune and Scorpio generation. You know, we think of intrigue. Scorpios are associated with spies. James Bond is a pretty obvious indication of the Scorpio archetype. Music, you know, we all know this, right? There's always a debate about whose generation has the best music. I'm pretty sure every baby boomer considers their generation to have the best music because they had the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Bob Dylan, Elvis Presley, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. I mean, these are iconic. Neptune and Scorpio, people singing about real life, real issues, real. This is a very lyric heavy atmosphere. I know my parents don't like anything that's that's superficial. They want to feel that music in their soul, and that is what makes a good song. So this idea of folk music, rock music with lyrics that were telling the truth, that were expressing, pulling out the BS of society and putting it onto the main platform for people to judge and make their own decisions about. So the trends were psychedelics, expanding your mind, dropping out of society, creating your own type of utopia, your own type of culture. We also had civil rights protests that were happening. Yeah, so the fight for equality, the fight for people to have all the rights that everyone deserved. And then we have the sex symbols of Brigitte Bardot, and Elvis Presley was really coming into being this sort of icon of a sex symbol. You know, Scorpio is associated with sex. They don't shy away from that, and they definitely did not in the 70s or the 60s. So the atmosphere was free love, sexual revolution, civil rights, social change, rejection of tradition. And now we come to Neptune and Sag, and I'm not going to talk about this on this slide as much because I'm going to go deeper into this time period, as this is when Neptune was on the Galactic Center. But as you can see, this is a very famous picture of David Bowie. The shift from this sort of like earthy and emotionally driven, lyrical, heavy, dark atmosphere into this much lighter, explorative rejection of you know, norms and wanting to sort of see what was out there. That freedom that's associated with Sagittarius to just do whatever, have a good time. The fashion was polyester, so polyester isn't a real material, it's synthetic. So this idea of syntheticness between 1970 and 1984 was definitely a theme with Neptune and Sagittarius. Platform shoes, like as if people were trying to get closer to the cosmos or closer to the stars. Metallic, shiny, glittery clothes. So there's a lot of association with the cosmos and the stars during this time period. One thing I was going to talk about was, sorry, I'm sitting on the floor, was the abolition of the Hays Code. And that was this, before we had the MPA rating systems, there was something called the Hays Code, where it designated what could be shown in film. And it really was mostly based on morality, and you know, people couldn't kiss for longer than 2.5 seconds on screen, and you couldn't do this and you couldn't do that. They wanted to make sure everything was very you know, packaged clean, and the films weren't going to be showing anything erotic or weren't going to be showing anything controversial. So that was abolished in the 70s, and that really shows another level of freedom. The films became quite interesting, if you want to say that, in the 1970s, much more experimental. A lot of weird stuff was happening with films in the 70s, but also it was the freedom to explore what a action film was. What was a blockbuster? I mean, Star Wars is famously created in the 70s, and this idea of sci-fi was also coming out. So music, famously, it's disco, funk. Synthesizers are going to be a very important thing for this time period, and it's going to be associated with Neptune on the Galactic Center. We can think about glam. We see Ziggy Stardust showing up here. Starman, can you see a keyword coming up here? The atmosphere was discotheques, roller rinks, Soul Train. That's all very much Neptune and Sagittarius. It was like a big party, right? A big party was happening. Liz Green, I like to read this quote. She says that Neptune in Sag was the evolutionary optimism and a quest for universal knowledge. So we may not think of disco as being very deep or very like spiritually enlightened, but it was this search for meaning beyond life on Earth, which, you know, Neptune and Scorpio, they were down in the depths of what was happening on Earth. Neptune and Sag was not concerned about that anymore. It was looking for something else beyond our earthly experience. So Neptune and Capricorn, 1984 through 1998. So we had, you know, another shift in the fashion. We had power suits coming out. We had shoulder pads, the big shoulders to make sure you could show off your, you know, your prominence. This sort of like shift towards women trying to look more masculine to prove their equality, to prove their ability to function and ability to go out there. I mean, this is the famous like working girl era with Wall Street, all of this like materialism that was coming in. Women were going out and they're just like taking over. Hairspray, we're thinking about even hair was really big in the 80s, leg warmers, neon colors, day glow. I always think of the cardinal signs as being kind of neon colored because they're so intense and they always start something. I like to think of the fixed signs as being like the primary colors, and then the mutable colors as being, or the mutable signs as being like the mutable colors. So that's how I think about it. So it's very appropriate that Neptune and Capricorn was like the in your face, bright, bright colors, neon, day glow. Did not shy away from that at all. The acid wash jeans, it was a lot of bigness, right? Because Capricorn is out there to prove its ability to achieve. It's out there to really make a power play, make a stand, build something that is sustainable and substantial and achieve all that you're meant to achieve. So the films had shifted away from more, you know, this experimental freedom realm of the 70s into more angsty, serious type topics. We think about The Breakfast Club as like this coming of age. We think of, you know, growing up. There's that movie, what is it? The Big Chill. I think The Big Chill actually came out in 1982, but that movie is like iconic for, looking back on our lives and seeing where we're at now. And, you know, there's just a lot of like angstiness in that. So serious, more, you know, more serious stories. We have, yeah, When Harry Met Sally, Schindler's List, Rain Man, Forrest Gump. You know, we're still talking about the blockbuster too, because people were really starting to identify films with a director, like a franchise-ness. We have the Lucas films. We knew exactly what the next Spielberg movie was going to be. Brockheimer movies were very identifiable. James Cameron was, you know, making Terminator, and he was making, you know, Titanic came out at the very end of this time. So we started identifying movies as specifically related to a director. Once again, Capricorn making that power play to show what's identifiable. Also, movies are becoming formulaic. People were making sequels. They made one movie, it was extremely popular, and they copied that format to make another extremely popular. I mean, if you know Capricorns, they know the formula to make something successful. They know how to plan something accordingly to make sure it succeeds. So that's another aspect of this Neptune and Capricorn generation. Things were being created with a business sense to make money, to be successful. The music, it was very eclectic. I mean, things were just coming out all over the place, and every single thing, it was like every single type of music was finding its way into the popular consciousness in a way to be successful, marketable. So we had metal music, we had pop, R&B, hip hop, gangster rap was really popular in the early 90s, late 80s. And of course, grunge was also there. So this is a huge array of different types of music, but all of them managed to make an impact and become extremely successful. So the last one I'm going to talk about is Neptune and Aquarius. So if there's any Neptune and Aquariuses here, you guys are, you know, the babies of the group, but I'm not going to leave you out. So 1998 through 2012, my oldest daughter is a Neptune and Aquarius. She is 14. And so this fashion is like typical Aquarius. We're thinking like, you know, things that are bedazzled. I always think of Aquarius as like wanting to put on the shiny things, but or just like being out there like with the like strobe lights and everything. Kind of a wacky culture, kind of a wacky fashion sense, like no rules, everything goes. Like, why? A lot of people look back at this generation, if you lived through it, as to what the heck was going on with the fashion, like the velour jumpsuits, the belly chains, the bedazzled jeans. Why was everyone wearing Von Dutch trucker hats, tube tops? Like everyone was obsessed with Uggs. I mean, there was this very out there type of atmosphere. And Aquarius, of course, is all about innovation and trying new things. So the fashion was definitely there. I mean, this was during the Y2K. This was the turn of the century. So there was a lot of optimism, excitement, this uninhibitedness of like, okay, we're going to be moving into the 21st century and everything is going to be incredible and computers are going to start doing all these things. I mean, this is when the internet was rising up. People started having home computers where they get on the internet. The internet was in all across. This is when I started like having my own internet, my own email. So the increased technology of this Neptune and Aquarius is associated with technology, also moved into films because special effects really came into its, I mean, obviously they're way further now than they were then, but really it was like a prominence during this time period. I mean, this is when Lord of the Rings came out and everyone was just mind blown. You know, Pirates of the Caribbean, X-Men, a lot of action movies and a lot of superhero themes, a lot of comic book themes. This is where the comic book movies really started taking off as well. Computer animation was really huge. DreamWorks, I'm just seeing what time it is, sorry. And yeah, so we were thinking about all these things that are associated with computers, the internet, and technology, all Aquarius types of ideas. The future, it was just, everyone was thinking about the future and what was happening. Auto-tune was created. So if you're thinking about music, you think about Cher's Believe when that came out and the ridiculous use of auto-tune in that song. And that was kind of like a weird thing to hear, but now it's in every song. So this digital trend was happening during this time. And it's still going on, but this was like, it was like kind of living through this crazy new world of digital technology. So we are gonna move back, if you can hang with me here, back to these generations, and we're gonna add an extra layer, which is the Chiron transits. So Chiron transits are extremely erratic, like we talked about. If you look at Pluto and Leo, there were 7 Chiron transits, Leo through Aquarius, that took place. There are all these little mini generations that were popping up. All of these, you know, Chiron is associated with woundedness, but so all of these little experiences that were going on personally for people were happening. Then we move into Pluto in Virgo, or Neptune in Scorpio, and there are 3 Chiron transits, Aquarius through Aries. And you can see they're getting a little bit longer. So I believe that Chiron is the longest transit of Chiron is through either Aries or Taurus. When you look at, down here in Pluto, during the Neptune and Sag generation, it only had 2 transits. And it was the only generation that was completely encapsulated by only 2 Chiron transits. So every other one, as we move into Pluto and Scorpio / Neptune and Capricorn, there were 6, Gemini through Scorpio. And then as we get into Neptune and Aquarius, there were 5. So that's kind of a main, I think, a big deal that there are only 2 Chiron transits during this time period. And they also line up with the other 2, the Pluto transit, the Neptune transit, and the final Chiron transit, all line up with 1984. So there's this interesting line, this division that was happening in 1984 that was kind of potent. So that's what I was noticing in my research, is like, what was happening? Well, what happens here at the end of Sagittarius? The galactic center is at the end of Sagittarius. It is between 26 and 27 Sagittarius. So that is where that is coming into, and we're going to focus on that this time period. So what is the Galactic Center? Okay, everyone's like, all right, half hour in, 40 minutes in. The Galactic Center is, sorry, I'm going to take a drink of water. So in 1933, Karl Jansky was a physicist. He had created this satellite which pointed up into the sky and was looking at different, if he could discover radio waves. He thought that the biggest radio waves would be coming from the sun, but he apparently pointed it towards the direction of the Sagittarius constellation and discovered there were radio waves coming from that area of the sky. So he published an article called Electrical Disturbances Apparently of Extraterrestrial Origin. So that was really exciting, right? Extraterrestrial origin. And he called this radiation star noise. So another keyword that we're going to talk about. So Sagittarius A asterisk was discovered on February 13th, 1974 by astronomers Bruce Ballack and Robert Brown. And this is when Neptune had moved into Sagittarius. Sagittarius A, the actual name Sagittarius A. So Sagittarius A is the actual point of the galactic center where it is located in our sky. The name Sagittarius A was coined in 1982 when Neptune was directly on the galactic center. The asterisk apparently in physics means an excited electron or an excited atom. So this was a very exciting discovery. So that's why there is a little asterisk name right next to Sagittarius A. Another interesting point was that on October 31st, of 2018, the discovery of conclusive evidence that Sagittarius A is a black hole was announced. So there had been a lot of debate about what it is, what is the galactic center? Why is it emitting these radio waves? What type of energy is pulling all of us around it? Because that's what we're doing. We're in a solar system and we're all rotating around the sun, but our sun is rotating within that arm of the Milky Way, and that the center of the Milky Way is the galactic center. So we are really rotating around the sun, which is rotating around the galactic center, which is everything's in motion in the universe, but the discovery, no one could prove that it was a black hole. So now we have conclusive evidence that there is a black hole at the center of Sagittarius A. And interestingly enough, when this happened, Chiron was square the galactic center and Neptune was approaching at 13 degrees Pisces. So Neptune was coming up to a square to the galactic center as well. So we're starting to see some connections between Chiron, Neptune, and the galactic center as we will continue to look at. So for the galactic center in astrology, it is at 26 degrees, 51 seconds. I think I put that wrong, but I always forget if it's like 1 or 2 for a second. So I think it might be 2. So the two main people that I'm going to cite are experts in the area of the galactic center astrology. So Michael Erlewine, and his quote is that research underway by astrologers in many countries shows that the galactic center to be a point of special significance, literally the lifeline of our sun. So the sign of Sagittarius has long been connected to the idea of truth and God and religion. So this element of us trying to get back to the origin or where everything started. So the point of Sagittarius A is somehow connected with truth or our center. So that's really how galactic center shows up in astrology. It's this ultimate source of pure creativity, this ultimate source of oneness. I mean, we think about how the universe was created. How was our galaxy created? This could be the point of that creation. This could be the essence of that truth of everything that we live and experience and our history and the planets that we are looking at in astrology. So it is a hugely critical point when you start adding it into charts to look at this powerful point of truth and centered and the divine connection to our source. Interestingly enough, Michael Erlewine is a musician, so that's another Neptunian connection between him and this idea of being connected to the source. I mean, Neptunians Neptunian also wants us to get back to that source, that wants us to be dissolved into this perfect place where everything, you know, wasn't ugly, where everything wasn't stressful and hard and real life didn't exist. Where was that? Where did we all come from? So that Neptunian element is very much connected to the galactic center as well. So Philip Sedgwick is the other person who does a lot of research. He's an astrologer who does research on the galactic center. He describes the experience of the galactic center astrologically as like an energy experience. So when we are connected to the galactic center, or when we look at the galactic center in our charts, we can experience this psychic defragging. So he talks about receiving new information from the galactic center. If it's the source of all creativity and source of all energy, then we're able to connect to that energy. If radio waves are coming from it, then we can receive this new idea, of innovation and new creativity. So when we think about how that comes through our brain, we have to psychically defrag our head or psychically defrag our brain before we can clear out the old stuff and bring in that new stuff from the galactic center. So we're allowing new information, innovation to be received. One thing he does talk about is that there's this delay involved with the galactic center. So the things that the ideas you have, the aha moments that come from the galactic center, this like, oh my gosh, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to, or I never knew it, I didn't see it in that way, has some type of delay where other people may not see that for about 6 to 9 months. That's what he says, at least. Also interesting that when Pisces is rising, galactic center is, close to being overhead or near the MC. So when Pisces is rising, you can look at a chart with Pisces rising and think about that galactic center energy being at the top of the chart. Philip Sedgwick is also a screenwriter, so once again, another Neptunian connection. Whenever we talk about psychic defragging or psychic energy, then we're also talking Neptune as well. Oh, Lynn Coiner, she's another astrologer. She talks about actual psychic experiences being connected to the geomagnetism, and the galactic center is the strongest source of cosmic radiation. So when we experience the galactic center via planetary conjunctions, what's happening is much more cosmic or celestial than terrestrial. It's something that's not of this world. It's something that has not been experienced before. We can't, put our finger on it exactly. It's very difficult to understand. Once again, a connection to Neptune, and sort of being this interesting combination of the galactic center energy and psychic ability or cosmic or celestial energy coming from outward or outside of the earth. What was I going to say? Neptune is technically the furthest out planet, or the major furthest out planet, the biggest furthest out planet. So technically it is the closest planet to the galactic center, since it's the furthest planet away from our sun. So there's also this kind of interesting magnetism between those 2 points. What if Neptune is this sort of catalyst between the galactic center and our experience here on Earth? That's just kind of something I'm throwing out there. That's not proven or anything, or I don't think that's been talked about in astrology, but if it has, please let me know. I don't want to steal anyone's idea. So how does Chiron figure into this? Well, it's interesting because we talked about Chiron and the origins of Chiron and how did it, get where it is in its orbit between Uranus and Saturn. And we think that, well, one theory is that Neptune, being the biggest, most magnetic, or having the most gravity of the outer planets, being the furthest out, somehow, Chiron was this asteroid going through the Kuiper belt, and all the TNOs with Pluto out there were being affected by Neptune's gravity. So Chiron was coming through and suddenly got pulled in by Neptune's gravity and found its place in between Uranus and Saturn. So once again, this magnetism that is associated with Neptune is also pulling in Chiron. So when you talk about Chiron, you think of some, I think, 2 main astrologers. Zane Stein is one of them. He wrote a book I don't have it in front of me, but these are quotes from his book. He argues that the ethereal energy of the galactic center is being channeled to us through centaurs such as Chiron. So once again, we have this connection between Chiron, the galactic center, Neptune as this channel of that energy coming in through this black hole at the center of our galaxy. So when Chiron was discovered, the galactic center was actually almost conjunct the ascendant. So this point was very much associated with Chiron's identity. The discovery degree described as a bridge between linking the earthly with the celestial. So the Sabian symbol for the galactic center, which is 26 Sagittarius, is the sculptor's vision is taking form under his hands. So once again, we're talking about the galactic center as being this source of creative energy. And Chiron being this bridge. I mean, Chiron is also associated with traveling and being this kind of wanderer because the orbit is so elliptical. It's 6:21. Okay, so I'm gonna try to get through the rest of this, but I don't know how much time I have left. So, because I have a ton of slides. So this is the actual Chiron discovery chart. So we can see that the galactic center is right here at 26. So you can see, yes, it is very much connected. And then there's Neptune kind of approaching because Chiron was discovered during Neptune and Sagittarius, the Neptune and Sagittarius period. So I might skip this one just because, I mean, Melanie Reinhardt wrote a really incredible article. It's on astro.com. Here's the date. You can go back and check it out. She talks about the galactic center as having a strong felt sense, but not easily verbalized or quantified. And the image, the most useful image for the galactic center as a centrifuge, where everything is spun away from the dark center, revealing an empty space. So where we are receptive to what comes out of that empty space, that's what all this connection between Neptune and Chiron. So how is that showing up here on Earth? How is that being embodied? All of these connections between pulling in, channeling that energy from the galactic center into our lives. So I'm going to kind of go through this. It's really some keywords. I mean, most people who have studied Chiron know that he's the wounded healer, and that some keywords are associated with him are healing and whole making. And that, I think, is very much closely connected to Neptune as well, as this desire to be one with divinity again. This quest, Liz Green's book is called Neptune, the Quest for Redemption. So I think there's a lot of similarities between Chiron characteristics and Neptune characteristics. The doorway being not belonging to either world, a portal between worlds. This is very potent for the point where we're going to get to here. Just want to make sure. Sorry, I have text. Oh, cool. So it's 8:30 there. Cool. So I can keep going. Yeah, because I have 42 slides. So I'm not gonna go through all of them. Yeah, this doorway.
You're doing awesome, Johanna. You're doing awesome. You're doing awesome. Yay. We want to hear everything you have to say.
Word. Thanks, Maria. So this is this relativity of time, this cusp, the flow of timelessness, disillusion is associated with Chiron, which ironically is associated with Neptune as well. I mean, the dissolving into timelessness. I love the word flow. I do. My research is connected to Neptune and flow and being in a flow state. So this connection between Chiron and Neptune and flow, being dissolved into that is an extremely close connection between Chiron and Neptune. So I'm seeing Chiron and Neptune as these two players that have similar interests or similar effects, but they go about it in a totally different way. That sometimes they have no connection to each other whatsoever, as we will see. The loophole, that's another word that Zainstein uses for Chiron. This is a very special means of escape, and it's to evade the obligation. Once again, escapism, Neptune, evading the obligation, Neptune. Okay, so I've consolidated all of the terrible graphs I made into one, which, yes, as we see here, Chiron in Taurus was from 1977. It was discovered 1979, I think. I have the actual date. I forget. 1982, all the way to 1984. So all of these 3 transits aligned at the very end. And what was at the very end? The Galactic Center. And then, as I'm going to shift into the micro topic of this talk, which is the subgeneration of the Xennials, or the Xennials, which is the in-between generation between Generation X and the Millennials, which ironically is encapsulated from 1977 to 1984. So are the Xennials the Chiron generation? I don't know. We shall see. So what was happening? As we dig deeper into Neptune and Sagittarius, what was being embodied through this Neptune, through this Chiron, through this approaching of the galactic center, all of this absorbing this energy of space and the galaxy and pure creativity. We see the birth of the Moog synthesizer, which was the mother of all synthesizers. For anyone who is interested in electronic music, this is where it all started. Neptune and Sagittarius is responsible for that. They made sounds that did not exist in nature. The synthesizers are, I mean, they're famous for not sounding normal. People are like, what is coming out of this weird? There was a huge rejection of synthesizers that came out in the past few decades because, you know, the desire to get back to like real natural noise. But the point is the synthesizer made, what was the word? Star noise or star, with the word that Carl Jansky used when he found out that there were radio waves coming from the galactic center. He called it star noise, I think. So that is what I'm proposing, is that the synthesizer was making star noise, and that was happening during Neptune and Sagittarius and as Neptune approached the galactic center. One other thing was, you know, this disco theme of music and roller discos. I was like kind of overwhelmed with how many roller disco movies were coming out during this time period. So what is a disco? What is a roller skate? It's a wheel spinning. It's an orbit. It's going around. It's in motion. And this may be kind of a stretch for some people who are like, oh my God, really? But yeah. So the rise of disco music was this fun party atmosphere. So Neptune and Sag was like not concerned with earthly events. It was concerned with what was out there in the atmosphere, what was beyond. Vogue proclaimed there are no rules in fashion game now. Once again, Sagittarius rejecting rules and just wanting to do whatever it wants to follow the way of adventure and freedom. One other thing that was happening was this popularization of the movie soundtrack. Now, before this, people did not go buy the soundtrack of a movie. The musicals that were coming out was a different type of thing. You know, the movie was all based around people singing and dancing, and that was the traditional movie or musical format. But the movie soundtrack was a movie that was made based on selling a specific song or a specific group of songs. Sorry, Saturday Night Fever is the one of the most popular. I think it's the second most popular soundtrack behind The Bodyguard. But that was kind of a groundbreaking thing. People went out and bought music from the movie, really, which had no connection to the movie plot other than them dancing to it. Another example that came out during this time was Flashdance. Hugely successful movie soundtrack, basically featuring a song in the movie, nothing to do with the actual character. She didn't sing it. There was lots of dancing in that movie, though. This is kind of an intermingling thing between movie soundtracks and dance movies. Purple Rain, another great example. We'll see some more images of that. And then Grease. Grease was a traditional, you know, musical, but when it was put on the movie that came out in the 70s, people went out to buy it because of the actual sound, the soundtrack. So Neptune on the Galactic Center, what was happening? So now we're getting into the really specifics. Technically, the internet was born during the Neptune on the Galactic Center time frame. No one was using the internet widely, but it was actually created in 1983. And what is the internet? It's an imaginary reality. It's a virtual reality. It's something that's out there in the atmosphere. It is not something you can see or something you can taste or feel tangibly. So this element of otherworldliness really showed up at being born as Neptune was coming across the galactic center. So we're going to see that space was a huge theme in the films that were coming out and the songs that were coming out during the time period of Neptune on the Galactic Center. E.T. was one of the most popular, most successful films of 1982. I think it was the most popular film of 1982. Blade Runner, Xanadu, Tron, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi. So these are sci-fi films, fantasy films. Dune was also, but all of these had a space theme in them. And it was very literal. The astrology was very literal during these times, and it showed up in the films as the galaxy, like the galactic center was just pushing through the films that were coming out, and we were just watching space on screen. Obviously, the synthesizer, the highly synthesized sounds in music and film, keyboards were huge during this time, and the movie soundtracks that were coming out were hugely synthesized, creating these weird, mystical, otherworldly background, atmospheric music that was happening. Another thing that was happening were movies were, they're obviously like E.T. and the Star Wars films were huge popular hits, but there were also these sleeper, unpopular cult following. Cults are associated with Neptune, especially Neptune and Sagittarius. But like I said, or like Philip Sedgwick said, is that the Galactic Center is associated with there being a delay. So these films were not popular until later on. So it was as if the Galactic Center, that energy was coming through, but people just didn't get it because there was that 6 to 9 month delay. And in some, some cases it was a lot, longer. So when I talked about the crystallization of Neptune themes, that's what I'm talking about. This desire to dissolve and to escape. That's why there were so many fantasy films, so many sci-fi films, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, Ghostbusters, Legend, Terminator, The Last Unicorn, Conan the Barbarian, The Dark Crystal, Splash. All of these were fantasy, horror, sci-fi films that were taking us away, this desire to get away from life on Earth into something totally different that was being highlighted, being crystallized by this connection between Neptune and the Galactic Center. It was as if Neptune had a megaphone. The Galactic Center was giving Neptune a megaphone to just speak its piece and to share this direct link to pure creativity, and it showed up on screen and in through music. Another thing that happened was the birth of the music video. I do have the chart for that, so we can look at it a little bit later, but it didn't exist before this time. Nobody thought about putting music and visual art together in a video format. And that was like the fusion of two Neptunian ideas, music and film. Like I said, Purple Rain, Flashdance. These were movies about music. They were not musicals. I mean, Grease 2 technically is a musical, but it was kind of a different type because it had become so much about the movie, not the actual musical. Purple Rain, based on, loosely based on Prince's life, but Flashdance, Footloose, Breakin', Beat Street. Most of these movies are based off of a dance sequence or a musical sequence where they're performing, but that's the real gist of the movie. I mean, there is a plot going on, but it's really to feature the music or to feature the dancing as a story, like as its own character, basically. So this fusion of music and film was extremely popular during this time where the Galactic Center was being activated by Neptune or vice versa. So here we go. Here's some pictures. You guys are probably sick of just saying like words. So here's some imagery of Neptune on the Galactic Center. There's the wonderful Flashdance. I mean, there's a lot of mistiness and water imagery. This is like, I actually saw this CD laying around my house and I was like, what? I have this CD? Where did this CD come from? I have an Asia CD. So this Asia CD, Heat of the Moment, was released in 1982 and is described on Apple Music as having indulgent instrumentals. If that's not Neptune on the Galactic Center, I mean, there's not even lyrics. It's just this sound coming out of it. It's this expression. It's this like a channeling of electronic music coming out of it. E.T. obviously close to came out during with Neptune on the Galactic Center. We see here the imagery of the moon, celestial objects. We go back to what I think Liz Coiner said, which is it's in a celestial experience. Neptune and the Galactic Center is not about the Earth. It's about what's out there. And we can see that in this sort of cosmic ocean that is showing up in all of this imagery. All right, here we go. The first one, the very first movie that came out, not exactly on the Galactic Center, but I felt like it was worth mentioning. Neptune was at 20 degrees of Sagittarius when the movie Xanadu came out. And I've never actually seen the entire thing, but I did watch the opening sequence of like this roller fantasy disco other world. And I was like, what am I watching? This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. So it was a box office disappointment. People were like, okay, this is kind of weird. Nobody liked it. Negative critical reviews. It was an inspiration for the creation of the Golden Raspberry Awards to recognize the worst film of the year. So Chiron is about rejection. Chiron's about people being rejected, being exiled. This movie was exiled. It was this strange combination of love and hate. The soundtrack, though, was a huge success. People loved the music. People talked about buying the vinyl and listening and singing to it in their bedrooms. And the song Magic was a #1 hit. So this fantasy music disco roller space film. So this Galactic Center energy is coming through as this weird combination of all of this Neptune, Sagittarius, Galactic Center, Chiron. Once again, the Galactic Center is representative of a delay. So yeah, it was, if anyone liked it, it was definitely delayed. And then this fantasy disco roller space film, I mean, I can't believe that is in one word, was saved by the music. So the music itself, again, becomes the Neptunian savior of this terrible film. And I'm sorry, if you love Xanadu, awesome, but I have not seen the whole thing. So if you can make a case for watching the whole thing, I will totally watch it. Once again, here we go. So Flock of Seagulls. I thought this was a hilarious and great representation of otherworldliness of, I mean, you look at the picture of this band, right? And what could be more Neptunian than this out of the world, totally fantasy like hair? I mean, they actually kind of look like they're not from this world, right? This song, so Neptune was actually directly on the Galactic Center when this song I Ran by Flock of Seagulls came out. And it was May 28th, 1982. They also released another song called Space Age Love Song. There's roller skating in that music video as well. So interesting connection there again. And the word Space Age Love Song, I mean, it's like this obvious representation of the Galactic Center through this Neptunian channel. I mean, Neptune is really kind of the medium of the Galactic Center within this time frame. And I'm not going to sing this for you. I thought about playing it, but I'm not going to subject you to Flock of Seagulls. If you like Flock of Seagulls, sorry. Hypnotize, I was highlighting some Neptunian lyrics, you know, trying to escape, trying to disappear, slowly disappearing from my view. Beam of light, Aurora Borealis. So we have some Galactic Center type themes coming in, some space themes, some atmospheric themes coming through here. Another example of a purely space, a purely literal translation of Neptune on the Galactic Center is this song, Major Tom by Peter Schilling. It came out in Germany, and then it came out in America in September of '83. It was directly on the Galactic Center at 26 degrees. And the character in the song is actually unofficially related to Major Tom, the protagonist of David Bowie's song in Space Oddity. And I mean, David Bowie is such a representation of, you know, spaceman and starman and being out there in the universe. So the fact that this song is referencing that, this song is basically about a character breaking off contact with the ground and traveling off into space. So he's just floating out there into who knows where. I mean, the lyrics is Earth below us, drifting, falling, floating, weightless. I'm sure you guys know the song. It's like a one-hit wonder. I was going to play it, but I think we got 20 more minutes, so I'm going to keep going. Another thing I wanted to note was the birth of the moonwalk happened during the Galactic Center, the Neptune on the Galactic Center transit. Neptune was at 28 degrees Sagittarius when the debut of the national television performance of the song Billie Jean, which famously showed the moonwalk across the stage. So this illusion of gliding backwards, and it's a fluid motion. Neptune, once again, showing up in a physical form. Neptune rules dance. And then the fact that it's called the moonwalk is astrology being literal, once again, coming through using space terms. So yeah, the dancer is being pulled backwards by an unseen force while trying to walk forward. That's the description of the moonwalk, and you can see it down there in the corner. All right, so this is kind of where my presentation goes down a little bit of a rabbit hole, because I wrote a whole blog article on Blade Runner, the astrology of Blade Runner, the astrology of Neptune on the Galactic Center, and how that is really, I would say if I was going to pick one movie out of the entire collection that happened during this time period, I would choose Blade Runner as iconically Neptune on the Galactic Center with a transit from Chiron. You know, it was obvious when it came out, it was at 25 degrees Sagittarius, so 1 degree off of the Galactic Center. It was a big flop. Nobody understood it. It was long. People thought it was boring. They didn't understand how complex it was. It was dark. It was moody. People did not, it was like 3 hours long. People were like, what is happening? Did not get it. Eventually, it became a cult film, and it's regarded as one of the best all-time sci-fi movies. Once again, we see this delay with the Galactic Center as stuff was coming out. People did not get it, but then later they saw the actual value in it and then revered it as being one of the best sci-fi films ever made. Soundtrack really, though, is the key factor. I mean, everything about the movie is very much Neptune on the Galactic Center, but the soundtrack composed by Vangelis was nominated for Golden Globe, Golden Globe, and for the BAFTA award for the best original score. The director of Blade Runner, Ridley Scott, describes his film as being very dark, literally and metaphorically, but with an oddly masochistic feel. Liz Green describes Neptune as masochistic, as this weird draw towards pain, finding this connection between pleasure and pain, the sacrificial aspect of being this masochistic idea. He also said that he liked the idea of exploring pain in the wake of his brother's death. That was the director, Ridley Scott, when he made this movie. So we see Chiron elements there, the idea of exploring pain, and Neptune showing up with this masochistic. I mean, Chiron and Neptune can definitely be thought of as masochistic, right? Because we're healing from this pain. We're using pain in a way to become healed or to become transcended in some way. So I thought this was funny. This is the, on the right, the two pictures on the right are pictures of the composer of Blade Runner, Vangelis, and on the left is a statue of Neptune. So I thought it was pretty interesting that if you were thinking of a person to embody a physical aspect of Neptune, it may be the actual director, the actual composer of the most Neptunian on the Galactic Center film. Now, I did go kind of down the rabbit hole with Vangelis because I wrote a whole article on him, but he was very much connected to the astrology. I'm not going to go into this whole thing. He is very, very connected to astronomy, to NASA. A lot of the European probes that were launched, he did music and composed music for them. A lot of his albums are space oriented and themed. He's currently writing an album called Juno. He also has an asteroid named after him. So if you type in asteroid 363, my glasses on, 6354, that asteroid is named Vangelis. He says music is science more than an art, and it is the main code of the universe. So very much connected to it, to astrology, to Neptune as being this channel of some type of other language, some type of universal language. This is a picture of his keyboard because everything he does is electronic. And I noticed since the keyboard makes noises that don't exist in reality. Once again, Neptune and Sag. He had to make symbols so we could identify what sounds were coming out of it. And oddly enough, it looks pretty close to a Neptune glyph. So that was very odd and eerie and interesting, and I wanted to share that as well. All the music that he did and he's famous for happened during Neptune on the Galactic Center. So his music really could be iconically Neptune on the Galactic Center, Chariots of Fire, da, 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 that song, that is him. He won the Academy Award for Best Song. It happened when Neptune was at 24 Sagittarius. Blade Runner was at 25. The next 3 movies he did were at 26, 27, and then at 1 degree Capricorn, which is, you know, close enough to be considered in orb with the Galactic Center. But most prominently, if you think about it, he was the one who created the music to Carl Sagan's Cosmos back in 1980 when that TV series came out. Neptune was not exactly on the Galactic Center then, but it was, you know, coming into an orb. So I wanted to share all of that as well. Alternative Neptunian embodiment. If you're not down with Vangelis, you can look at Pharrell Williams as being an embodiment of Neptune, because he did create his very first group with his friend Chad Hugo in 1990 called the Neptunes. It was during his first Chiron square, as we see Chiron being connected to Neptune again. And a year later, Chiron and Leo trines his natal Neptune. He was born with Neptune and Sag. All right, I'm gonna take a drink here again as we move into the end of this. This is the Galactic Center. This is our galaxy. The arm of the Milky Way is here. This bright light is the star located, Sagittarius A, located near the black hole of the Galactic Center, which is, you can't really see it, but it's in this darker area. So to really bring all these themes in together, Chiron was discovered as Neptune was moving through Sagittarius. It was approaching the Galactic Center. So we can look at that. We talked about how the Galactic Center was on the ascendant as Chiron was discovered in the discovery chart. Interesting, you know, Chiron and Sagittarius are both centaurs. We also know that Chiron is one of the designated centaurs of the bodies out there, astrological bodies, and Sagittarius is a constellation. But in mythology, Chiron was a centaur. And it's debatable about the myth. Did Chiron become the constellation Sagittarius because he was eventually put up into the sky? There's also a debate that Chiron became the constellation Centaurus. So depending on what you use, those are 2 different options. But the connection between Sagittarius, the Galactic Center, Chiron, they're all kind of intermingled in between that. One thing about Chiron and Neptune, I talked about as being voyagers, exploring the cosmic sea. You know, we talked about how Chiron is moving between Saturn and Uranus, and I think Zeinstein talks about them as Chiron carrying messages in between Saturn and Uranus. Sometimes it's more like Uranus, sometimes it's more like Saturn. And this idea of music healing us, where I thought that the connection between Chiron and Neptune is very clear here. Music allows us to absorb information. So if we're absorbing the Galactic Center, then we do that. We can do that through music, through Neptune. So if we talk about Neptune's association with magic, then it's manifested that way through the radio waves, through the star sound that we're talking about, through the movies, through the films, or through the music that we have in our lives. So as Chiron and Taurus, as this micro generation, which I'm going to go into next, you know, the Xennials were like this in-between generation. They didn't resonate with the Millennials. They didn't want to resonate with the Generation X. So they're like this lost generation in between, exiled. You know, that's very much a Chironian word. There's just no place for them. So maybe they really are the Chiron and Taurus micro generation. The magnetism of the Galactic Center is associated with that hypnotic pull of Neptune. Oh, I already went into this. So yeah, that similarity between that we're all spinning around the galactic center, and that pull of Neptune that makes us sort of entranced by film, entranced by celebrity, entranced by music. That is similar between those two elements. Okay, so here's a chart. First music video airs on MTV on August 1st, 1981 at 1 a.m. I think it was. No, midnight. 12:01 it aired in New York. So Neptune is in conjunct Chiron. We can see it right here. Chiron rising. Neptune over here, close to the galactic center, so within 4 degrees of an orb. But they are 150 degrees apart from each other. So this energy of the inconjunct between Chiron and Neptune, I think, is really important in a way to describe that. And I know we talk about the inconjunct as not being harmonious. The two signs have nothing to do with each other. They don't agree on anything. We have a mutable fire sign and we have a fixed earth sign. They don't talk. They're opposite, male, masculine, feminine, opposite. They're not even harmonious elements within each other. So what does that really mean, right? The aspects that were happening between Chiron and Neptune during this time when Chiron was discovered and Neptune was on the galactic center were one of these three aspects between them, depending on when you were born. So I like to think of those Xennials, or this Taurus, Chiron and Taurus generation, as using these three aspects, as experiencing these three aspects as very important, as part of their lives, as part of their identities. So Zeinstein actually wrote in his book what Chiron is associated with when it is in an inconjunct aspect. And he said it's the ability to view the subtle energy behind things, the twists, the turns, invisible things, and then can draw out things and control them. So this is also, these larger definitions are all from Rob Hand, Planets and Aspect. The inconjunct, the 150 degrees, is the unification of signs with nothing in common. There's a tension. This is an unease between them. There's no logical connection. But somehow there is this link between them. Like I said, Chiron and Neptune seem to want the same things or seem to have similar associations with them, but they're doing them in opposite ways. They're doing them in different ways. So that's what I'm totally exploring this right now. I haven't come to any sort of major conclusion about this, but if you were born between 1977 and 1984, you will have one of these aspects between Chiron and Neptune. So this is the intro to the Xennials. This came from an article I noticed, which said, we don't care about this entire generation of Americans, but they're pretty used to it by now. Don't call them millennials, don't call them Gen X, just call them already. Thought that was pretty Chironian. Nobody cares. They're exiled. They don't fit in anywhere. They don't want to be this. They don't want to be that, but nobody cares. So that's why I'm sure, which was interesting because I said I was going to originally just talk about the Xennials, but nobody wanted to just talk about the Xennials. We want to hear about everything. So I expanded this presentation into a wider topic. So I thought it was very ironic that this was very resonant in that as well. Okay, who are the Xennials? So this is the end of the talk. I know we have about six more minutes. So, if people just want to see the slides, I'm gonna hopefully make this a separate talk for another group eventually, so I can just do the Xennials for people who are interested, and then go to the end.
Johanna, nobody will shoot you if you go a few minutes over.
Keep going, Johanna, keep going. We want to hear you talk.
Okay. Sweet. So Xennials, who are the Xennials? They're called the Oregon Trail generation. That is what this little thingy here. People born between 1977 and 1984. I was class of 2000, woohoo. So it's kind of like the people who are coming of age when the millennium happened, when the millennium turned. They're also differentiated from millennials because they had an analog childhood and a digital adulthood. Most Xennials didn't get their first cell phone until college or, very late in their high school days. Nowadays kids have, my 14-year-old got a cell phone in middle school. So But we were the last generation to have a totally internet-free childhood, a totally cell phone-free childhood, and then we grew up and became, and we sort of were going through this. We were like the crash test dummies, or like the testers of all of the different technologies that were coming out, because we were at these pivotal moments where it was applicable to us, and we sort of learned how to use them as they were coming out. These are all the original internet. The birth of the internet was happening. We're called the Spice Girls generation. I thought we were the Jinko generation, which is this big wide leg pants that were popular between 1995 and 1998. And it was marketed directly for, I think, to 15 or 17 to 21-year-old boys. So yeah, that was pretty much who the Zennials were during that time. I like to think of us as the Casio generation, because Casio was invented in 1980. We were like the first kids who got to like have a little keyboard, little mini keyboard to play with as part of our toys. So these are defining moments for the Zennials. What was happening? What were, like I said, the Pluto things that were going on to help shape and define our generation. So I don't want to go through every single one. I didn't do a chart for every single one. I just did a few. And, you know, during middle school, that was the Oklahoma City bombing. That was kind of what shaped that. This was middle school, beginning of high school for a lot of people. This was during a first Chiron square for the Zennials. High school, we were in high school when the Columbine shooting happened. So a high school shooting happened while we were in high school. So things were kind of happening that were identifying us, that were sort of time stamping us and making us sort of molded into this. What was shaping this generation? The Columbine shooting definitely shaped our high school experience. Of course, the rise of the internet, we also talked about that. The first time we ever voted was during the 2000 recount. I remember looking forward to voting so much and then just being completely disillusioned after that, after what happened in Florida. And then, you know, that's a very Neptunian experience. So Neptune and Chiron have these timestamps on this generation that have an interconnection between this inconjunct, or this stressful, tense relationship, but they're both linked together. We were in college when 9/11 happened. So the first time we got to leave home, a lot of people, you know, went to colleges in other cities, or they went to college on the East Coast. I was in Boston when 9/11 happened. So it was an incredibly like reality check of being far from home during a major crisis that was happening in our country. We entered the workforce when Hurricane Katrina happened and the economic crash of 2006. So this is more association with the millennials. The millennials are supposed to be identified with coming out of college and not being able to pay off their bills because they couldn't find jobs because we had an economic crash. So that is definitely associated with that, but definitely for the Zennials as well. Our Saturn return spanned across a few years. So the swine flu that came out, I put that in there because we were going through a pandemic right now, but Deepwater Horizon, I remember that being a huge timestamp and a pivotal moment in our culture. Instagram was launched in 2010. The Aurora movie theater and the Sandy Hook shooting happened in 2012, and that was a very that I feel like was associated most with my Saturn return. That was a huge reality check and a huge time to grow up moment. Obama was also elected during that time as well. And now we're reaching parenting and middle adulthood. A lot of us are on the verge of turning 40 or have already turned 40. And that's been identified with the Trump presidency and the pandemic of 2020. So I think I have some charts. Oh, I had to put this in there. Getting pretty tired of living through historical events. So that's a pretty resonant Zennial meme, millennial meme. I'm sure everyone feels this way, but I really think this resonates with the Chiron generation. I did make some charts. This is the Columbine shooting. Neptune and Chiron were sextile. I was just noting the interrelations between Neptune, Neptune-Mars square. Neptune was square the Zennial's natal Chiron in because Zennials had Chiron, were born with Chiron and Taurus. So Neptune was at 4 degrees Aquarius, and it was squaring Taurus. Here's 9/11's chart, Chiron and Mars on the galactic center. You can see that down here. So we have a Chiron link, we have a galactic center link. Neptune was square, the Zennial's Chiron, the Zennial's natal Chiron. This is the Neptune's first full orbit since its discovery. And we see that Neptune and Chiron are conjunct up here in Pisces. The North Node was also on the galactic center. Close to the galactic center. And this is also during the Zennial Saturn return. So it's Neptune. It's like coming home to Neptune. Neptune was definitely involved in our Saturn return. This is the actual Neptune return. We'll go on to the next one. So these are some famous Zennials. I'm sure you can all recognize who they are. Beyonce, Mark Zuckerberg. I don't have a picture of Beyonce or Mark Zuckerberg, but Britney Spears, Meghan Markle, Anne Hathaway, Kim Kardashian, Serena Williams. These are famous Zennials. And they, if you think about their stories, you can think about the themes of exile, the themes of Neptune. Obviously, they're all celebrities, so the Neptune is already there. But the dissolution of reality, you know, Britney Spears is considered, there's this whole Free Britney movement going on where she's like trapped in this weird alternate reality. She can't get out. There's this exile. She was exiled from her own life, basically, because she has no rights. She's under conservatorship. Meghan Markle, very, very famously exiled from the royal family. She made the choice to leave the royal, or to become separate from the royal family, but also felt like she was being ostracized and exiled, separated from them already. You know, Serena Williams, she famously described her experience with childbirth as being not believed when she told the doctor she had a blood clot. She thought she was having a blood clot, which she was, and almost died. But she did not feel like she was being taken seriously. No one listened to her. So that other experience of Chiron is coming in. No one's listening to you. No one cares. You're being exiled from your own body, basically. So I'm not going to talk about every single one, but you can sort of look and see how this theme of Chiron, this Chiron generation, Chiron and Taurus, is showing up with these Zennials. And here we go, the last. I think we already talked about all this stuff. One other thing that was interesting is the first companion for Chiron, Pholus, I think, I forgot how to say that name exactly, was discovered in January 1992, which was happening during the Zennial's first Chiron square. We already talked about this, but the upcoming things I'm interested in looking at are the Neptune square to the galactic center, which is going to happen between 2022 and 2026, and the upcoming Chiron return for the Zennials, which happens between 2028 and 2034. So those are things that I'm going to be paying attention to in the next years, because obviously they're going to be happening to me, but I think it's going to be ongoing for the research that I'm going to continue to do on Neptune, the galactic center, the connection between Chiron, and all of those intermingled. So thank you all. I got through it. I can't believe it. So thank you for having me here. If you would like to check out my website, it is orbitalastrology.com. I'm on Instagram at orbitalastrology, Twitter at Pisces Hana. I also have a Facebook group called Astroflow. So that's a concept I'm developing where Neptune and astrology are being embodied through movement and through flow, specifically hula hooping. And I do some presentations on hula hooping and astrology if you guys are interested in that. And if you would like a copy of these slides, if you want to go back and really dig into everything that I wrote down and all the charts, then yeah, definitely email me. It's pisceshana@gmail, or just my first and last name, Johanna Rader @gmail. So
I do want to mention, I have video recorded this along with audio recorded it, and I will in a few days make the video available on Hightail for about 45 to 60 days. If you want a direct video, although obviously that file is going to be a lot larger than if they just ask for your slides.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So if you want to peruse the slides at your own leisure, you can email me and I'll send that to you. So
we have, you know, we will continue till about 9:30, so we have about 20 minutes or so. If you have a particular question about something that Johanna spoke about, now's the time to ask it. There were questions going on and on throughout the chat room, so there's tons of questions and comments. But if it's a specific question somebody has, you know, it'd be a good way to take it from there.
Sure, I can scroll through here, or if someone wants.
I just wanted to thank Johanna for an absolutely inspired, transcendent, just amazing organization of this nebulous kind of talk, but it was just so fabulous. And there's basically half the chat is everyone like having their heads blown, going,
oh really? I haven't even looked.
Yeah, so I just find it so amazing because, you know, they say the universe is expanding, right? They say the universe is expanding. So basically the universe is expanding and you're thinking, well, what's going to happen to us? What's going to happen to all the planets? Everything's just going to keep expanding until, you know, we're going to be in another galaxy. But that doesn't happen because the sun rotates around the galactic center, and the galactic center is keeping the sun where the sun is supposed to be, which is keeping all of us where we're supposed to be. So it's like the galactic center is like the cosmic belly button, you know, like that got tied off and like knotted. And, you know, people say, don't play with my belly button because you're going to unravel me and I'll fly around the room, you know? So it's kind of like, you know, the galactic center is keeping us all together. And I just wanted to point out to everybody in the audience to donate for this lecture. Please look at the chat. The donate link for GoFundMe is there. Yeah, this was just mind blowing. I love what you did with this talk. It was just so fabulous.
Oh, thank you. I was kind of like, am I gonna really go down the rabbit hole here, and are people gonna be on board? So I'm glad that people found it interesting. And yeah, I mean, I love film, I love music, I love astrology. I could talk about that forever. So thank you for letting me just go there for an hour and a half. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys. So you are the first ones to see this presentation, and any, you know, comments that you guys would have on how I can make it better for the future, because I hope to present it to other groups. And yeah, I'm sorry, I'm reading the chat now.
I just love that you brought up the Zennials, because we do have Zennials in the audience, and there is a lot of interest in Zennials. It's just that, you know, we're really picky in New York. We're like, you've gone out to dinner with me. So, you know, you go out to dinner with a New Yorker, they're like, yes, I want this thing on the menu, but could you also add this? And could you also do that? Like, we're annoying like that. But, you know, you brought up Pholus, which I found to be fascinating, because there's that chironic feeling of, you know, injury and being trapped. But one of the properties of Pholus is being released. So it's kind of great that, you know, if you're someone trapped and your best buddy that hangs out with you is somebody who like releases people, that's a good friendship.
Yeah.
Somebody,
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to mention a question in the chat room, but finish if you want to respond to Maria. I don't want to interrupt that.
No, I was going to say there's just a lot of interesting paradoxes between Neptune and Chiron and the Galactic Center. You know, the fact that it's like you said, holding everything together, but pulling everything in and everything expanding at the same time, you know, really does create this weird, push and pull dichotomy of where do we belong? Where are we going to be? Where is, do we even have, like, we have a center, but what center is the center of the center? So it's, it just is really interesting combination or conversation. So
the center of the center is a black hole.
Yeah, right. And we are being pulled towards that black hole. So it's like, what is keeping us where we are?
So somebody's asking, how do we consider natal oppositions to the galactic center? Do oppositions to it in a natal chart or even squares to it matter?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think we need to look at all of the different aspects, especially the Ptolemaic ones. Those are definitely the ones that we look at as being the strongest. I looked at the minor aspects or the non-traditional aspects, because we're looking at the outer planets. We're looking at non-traditional, you know, the galactic center and Chiron. Those things are what this talk is really about. So I think that there's associations between that, between the non-traditional aspects between the two. But no, every position, if you look at your chart, definitely look at squares to the galactic center, look at oppositions, conjunctions. It's not just the conjunction. You know, I don't want to say that people who don't have Neptune on the galactic center aren't special, or I think that there is that tension between the galactic center and other positions in your chart. You know, if you have the galactic center on your ascendant, like the Chiron discovery chart has, if you have it square to your midheaven, or you have it opposite to your descendant, or you have it trine to your sun. I mean, those are things that are going to be extremely important. So I'm still doing a lot of research on what exactly that energy of the galactic center, how we can use the energy of the galactic center in tangible ways. So Philip Cedric's website is definitely a good place to start if you're interested in like the more energetic, psychic defragging sort of manifestation of the galactic center. So definitely check that out.
Okay. A lot of comments. Which orb do you use for squares? Me personally, I wouldn't go above 10, but you know, I don't know if you have a particular orb, Johanna.
I do really tight orbs. That's why I tried to keep the galactic center. The examples I showed of the music and the movies that were coming out to like 1 to 2 degree orb of the galactic center. The galactic center does actually shift. I think every 70 years it moves a degree, or I have to double check on that. But so yeah, just like definitely keep that in mind if you are looking at an orb around the galactic center. I think it can be, you know, up to 5 degrees. If you use, you know, bigger degrees, I feel like the orb debate is always like whatever your preference is, use that. Yeah. But I like to keep, you know, 3 to 5 degree orbs.
And Lihira Gayan said a while ago, Neptune was on the galactic center in February to June 1817, and then December 1817 to January 1818. And he points out, and also in 1818, later on the year, 25 Sag, the first cholera pandemic occurred in 1817 to 1824, just to add more information to the chat in general, you know, we're talking about.
Yeah, Neptune is associated with pandemics and illness, so it makes sense. I think there was a recent presentation.
And the same person, Lahiragan, says that according to Lynn Coiner, in recent years, I realized that the galactic center is much larger than 1 degree, so that this person allows 2 degree orbs because the image itself is bigger than 1 degree.
Yeah, it spans across that 26 to 27 degree Sagittarius, and then eventually it will move, you know, to 27, 28. I think it might already be at 27, 28, but yeah, eventually it will get Capricorn.
Yeah. Doesn't seem to be a lot of the questions. One thing I do want to mention, Bart was pointing out that the Wizard of Oz and stuff like that, Gone with the Wind, Gone with the Wind, but the Wizard of Oz were not necessarily popular at the time, although again, time came along and made it better. And I just wanted to nitpick and say, videos started mainstream with MTV, but the Beatles made videos, David Bowie made videos in the 70s, the Monkees were doing videos, but it became everybody has to have a video now when MTV became, you know, ubiquitous. Right. Didn't matter if you knew how to make a video, you had to have one, you know. Right.
I mean, in the 60s and, you know, the Beatles, like Sgt. Pepper, you can think about that, and Yellow Submarine, and those were films, really. Like, they were shot on film, and then the video aspect kind of came in to, you know, when MTV started, and it was much more like accessible, and everyone could go out and make a video, and it was like experimental with, well, I mean, Sgt. Pepper is experimental, and the Beatles were too.
Once the Beatles stopped touring, they started making little videos to play on variety shows, and the Doors did the same thing. They couldn't be in every show, so here's, you know, a video or a film, we didn't call them videos back then, of our latest song, and they would do a little performance to it. So it began evolving in the 60s, and then of course it came to its full, if fruition's the right term, MTV, when it became, you know, mainstream.
Right, definitely. Thanks for pointing that out.
I lived through it all, so I didn't have to look it up. Anyway, anything else? Let's see. Nobody seems to be making a lot of comments, so I'm going to stop the video. We can keep talking if you want, but we've kind of encapsulated your entire presentation. So let me stop that.